I committed adultery. I did these things.
Don't ask me things like that.
Just a normal kid.
You're a normal kid who killed your parents.
Michael Jackson, adored by his fans, mocked by the press.
More popular than ever, also more weird than ever.
He was the perfect target.
He shared his pain with Barbara Walters.
How do you feel when they call you
Wacko Jacko. I have a heart and I have feelings. I feel that.
And took on the tabloids.
That is garbage. Don't buy it. Don't buy into it and don't believe it.
Now, his nephew and brother tell Barbara the real story behind his comeback tour.
His kids never saw him perform, and he wanted them to see what their dad can do.
And share their intimate memories with Barbara.
What did you know? What did you think?
I was going to hear the worst news in the world.
On Barbara Walters Presents.
Michael Jackson was one of the most famous and controversial people in the world. He was fascinating and a mystery. From the beginning, he was more talented than it seemed possible for a child to be. As he grew, he became a puzzle of contradictions that resisted easy solutions. He was a master showman and a sensitive recluse, a source of pride for African Americans who changed all his most visibly black features. A person who yearned for innocence, but there were those who said he destroyed it. He created his own myth, and it devoured him. How could someone known by millions remain an enigma even beyond the grave? Who was Michael Jackson? What drove him? What really killed him? Who was the real Michael Jackson? Gary, Indiana, Michael Jackson's home, was a tough, racially segregated, working-class city dominated by steel mills. Michael was born in 1958, the seventh of 9 children. His father, Joe, operated a crane at a steel plant, and his mother, Catherine, a Jehovah's Witness, worked part-time at Sears. Music was always part of the Jackson family life. I recently interviewed Tito Jackson, Michael's older brother, who took me through the beginnings of the Jackson 5. Tito, how did the Jackson 5 get started?
My father had just come home from a long day's work, and he'd be telling us, be quiet, hold it down in there, I'm trying to get some rest or whatever. My mother would say to him, Joe, you need to listen to them.
Huh.
I think they have some talent. I think they can sing. My father said, them boys can't sing. Kate, those boys can't sing. Joe listened to him. He heard us sing. He immediately took his next paycheck and bought everything. Microphones, amps, guitars.
Michael and Marlon, the 2 youngest, were not originally part of the band.
Michael and Marlon were just little bitty babies. And we'll tell them, get out the room. You're too young to be in the group. You're too young. You're too young. Michael performed one day at this elementary school, and his performance was so brilliant. We were looking at each other going like, is that it? We couldn't believe it was our
that
brother.
one of us? Yeah.
We never knew he could sing like that.
Huh.
We rushed him home and told him, of course, you're in the group. Can I be in the group? Yeah, you're in the group, Mike. You in the group. You too, Marlon. You too.
Joe Jackson had always wanted to be a professional musician. He had hoped his own talent would pull the family out of poverty, but it hadn't.
As his sons grew older and he became more and more desperate to get out of the ghetto, to get out of the steel mill, to make more money, he decided to drive them. Every day after school, they were playing their instruments in the living room, and they were learning dance steps and figuring out what songs to play. And that's when he kind of transferred all that ambition that he had onto his sons.
So Joe quit his job to work full-time, managing his son's band. The band began to tour. That's an unusual life for children.
We did a lot of talent shows, and we did weddings and mall openings and nightclubs. They were paying more than $10. We were doing it.
Audiences loved them so much they threw money at their feet.
We would do our whole show. People would throw out money, just gauze them. Making like $300 on the floor and change, and make 15, from the house.
Over the next few years, they began to play bigger venues. like the Regal in Chicago and the Apollo in New York, opening for famous acts. It was a musical education for young Michael.
I used to love to, watch everybody on stage, James Brown, Jackie Wilson. I've learned so much from all those greats.
If you look at those early moves that he was doing when he was 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way up to 10 or 11 years old, they were very sophisticated moves. He could do things that James Brown was doing.
When Michael was 11, the Jackson 5 auditioned for Motown Records. In the 90s, when I sat down years later with Berry Gordy, the head of Motown, he told me he had noticed something special about Michael from the start. Tell me about the first time you saw these kids.
Well, they came in to audition for me. This kid, he had a knowingness about him that the other kids didn't seem to have. He never took his eyes off me. One of the kids said, well, are you going to sign us? And Michael sort of smiled like, of course he's going to sign us. Of course.
In December 1969, Motown launched them nationally with an appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show that made the Jackson 5 instant stars.
Oh, baby, give me one more chance. Won't you please let me back in your heart?
Suzanne DePass, Gordy's creative assistant then, was amazed at their instant popularity.
It absolutely went from complete anonymity to total celebrity in one beat. The first time we got off the plane in Philadelphia for their first concert, they got mobbed, and it never changed. That was pretty profound for those days because there had not yet been, I don't think, a young black group that had created what was tantamount to Beatlemania.
Once you signed with Motown, you were very popular. The fans mobbed you, yes? What was that like for little kids?
It was fun, but it was very scary. We always had to plan a getaway. When we arrived at the airport, there'd be thousands and thousands of fans. The security would pick up Michael and Marlon and just run with them.
It hurts to be mobbed. I mean, you feel like a noodle. One arm is this way and your neck's that way.
I feel like spaghetti.
Really, it really hurts. They just actually want any part of you, actually. They just grab your clothes, grab your body.
By 1970, the family had moved to a mansion in LA. The band was touring constantly, putting out hits and raking in money.
The press and the fans recognized Michael more and more, and it became a disproportionate kind of worship for him, and interest in him, and obsession with the little one.
Child stars they're in such a strange position because in their real lives, they're often playing the adult. They're the breadwinner of the family, often. They have an unheard of power in a way in the family, and yet they're at the service of the family. Michael had to do what his father ordered.
Joe Jackson was a strict and controlling figure in Michael's life.
The rules, they must be followed to the fullest extent. We always teach against the big head because it makes a child think that he's better than can nobody tell him anything, and so keep him under control.
He beat his sons. I mean, he was physically abusive towards Michael in particular.
If he hit me, I would hit him back, which was terrible. And I would run around the house and hide and all that stuff. But I would really get it more than anybody.
Your father has said that he was tough on you kids. He admitted that there were whippings. Some people felt that he was abusive.
We were brought up in a place that wasn't the nicest place in America. There was gangs, violence, and everything else. So
you didn't feel that your father was abusive, was too tough?
Not at all. When a
no
kid,
kidding, really? Because that's a story.
Back then, it was something that parents did. You got abused, you get out of line. It's different today.
Michael had no friends his own age, no life outside of show business. Over time, the once playful and confident child became a shy and awkward teen, plagued with acne and insecure about his looks.
Michael is quiet now. When he was younger, he wasn't that quiet. But I don't know, I think the stage might have done that to him. Because wherever he go, everybody's coming out to see Michael Jackson, you know, want to look at him and see what he looks like. And he said he feels like an animal in a cage.
I get embarrassed easily, and I don't know, sometimes being around, you know, everyday people and stuff, I feel strange, I do.
Michael said the only place he felt comfortable was on stage, and that he drove himself to be perfect.
Actually, you're becoming like a stage addict. I really am. Like when there are off days and there is no show, I'm up at night dancing just the same. I just have to. I'm just so used to it. My body is almost mastered to do it at a certain time. I just go crazy. So when there's off day, I'm still like performing just about. It's really strange because I'm an addict. Can't help it.
The pressures on Michael would intensify, and his reactions would become extreme. When we return, how do you feel when they call you?
Yeah, Wacko Jacko.
In 1979, Michael Jackson turned 20. For him, growing up meant only one thing: creating his own music.
There's other kinds of sounds of music that I love to do. It hurts what is inside of me and it can't get out, and it's hidden from the world. When I do those solo albums and I'm doing all kinds of different music, it's wonderful. I feel like I'm accomplishing what I'm supposed to do.
Even as he continued playing with his brothers, Michael sought the next musical step. He teamed up with producer Quincy Jones to create his breakthrough solo album, Off the Wall.
There's a great moment in the Destiny tour. At the end, he comes out with the black suit and the bow tie and the white socks and the black shoes. It shows Michael fully formed as a solo artist. Like, this is who I am now. I'm separate from my family band. I'm gonna be this guy. It's like the moment in The Wizard of Oz when it goes from black and white to color. It's like all of a sudden we're in the future of what pop and dance and rock and roll and Michael Jackson is going to be.
His next album, Thriller, exploded, winning every award and breaking every record.
And the winner is Thriller! Beat it, Michael Jackson.
Off the Wall, Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
And his moonwalk on the Motown 25 special in 1983 made him the biggest star in the world.
Indeed, he went into orbit. I mean, he went into orbit and never came down.
He starts to like hang out with President Reagan and Nancy Reagan and Princess Diana, and all these celebrities are flocking to Michael's incredible star power. They just want a piece of it because the light is shining so vividly and so brilliantly.
Yet Michael was still living at home with his parents. He was still a practicing Jehovah's Witness, which meant no dating, no drugs, no cigarettes. The gap between Michael as a person and Michael as a star was growing. And as a star, there was nothing Michael couldn't imagine.
As he becomes more famous, he starts to develop this philosophy that he wants to create a more limitless world for himself. So he doesn't want any boundaries at all. He doesn't want boundaries of race. He doesn't want boundaries of gender. He doesn't want any boundaries on his music. He doesn't want any boundaries on how much money he can spend on anything, certainly not his creative visions. He doesn't even want any boundaries on his own facial structure.
Over the next several years, a series of plastic surgeries will transform his physical appearance.
Michael Jackson's been overhauled more than the Statue of Liberty. This is how he looked before the nose job, the chin job, and the eye job.
Michael's face became another one of his artistic creations, but his skin actually got lighter because of a medical condition, one he kept secret until his mid-30s. Michael was suffering from vitiligo, a skin disease that caused white blotches on his face and body. Then in 1984, a calamity brought him new physical problems.
We were filming a Pepsi commercial for the Victory Tour, and they were using pyro, and Michael had hairspray in his hair, and one of the sparks from the pyro landed on Michael's head and caught him afire. He was screaming out my name, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get to him quick enough.
Michael was hospitalized and put on painkillers for months. He was left with scars that would require more medical treatments in the future and more painkillers. When he returned to the public eye, he seemed to push the boundaries even more.
It's not everybody who tries to buy the Elephant Man's bones and travels with a pet chimpanzee.
Michael played with the press. He was having fun with publicity and trying to come up with ways to get more attention. But ultimately it backfired. I mean, I think the public sort of said, this guy is weird.
Wacko Jacko.
He hides in his room afraid.
Persistent rumors that followed
His
him.
bizarre behavior.
Constant source of interest to the paparazzi.
We talked about the press in 1997. How do you feel when they call you
Wacko Jacko? It's not nice. I'm not a wacko.
There are those who would say that you add to the attention.
No, I don't.
Well, the masks, the mysterious behavior.
There's no mysterious behavior. Maybe I like to live that way. I like to dress that way. I like to dress that way, you know? You should not say he's an animal. Should not say he's Jacko. I'm not a Jacko. I'm Jackson. I have a heart and I have feelings. I feel that when you do that to me. It's not nice. Don't do it.
As public love turned to public ridicule, Michael became even more isolated by his own fame.
I can't take a walk in the park. I can't go to the store. I have to hide in a room. You feel like you're in prison.
Do you think it's the paparazzi, the celebrity, the tabloids, the public? Who?
The public is fine.
They buy the tabloids.
They buy the tabloids. So don't buy it. That would shut them down. To make ugly stories and gossip and rumors and to be vicious and evil and ugly, that is garbage. Don't buy it. Don't buy into it and don't believe it.
If you could, turn off the fame, turn off the paparazzi, have a normal life, would you do it? Even if it meant giving up performing?
I'd do it. I'd have to be able to create. I have to create something. I would rather die if I couldn't create. You can't shut me down. I have to give it out.
Michael's escape was Neverland, a 3,000-acre ranch with a private theater, a zoo, and carnival rides. It was perhaps his fantasy of childhood, the one he never had. Michael's nephew, TJ, his brother Tito's son, often visited Neverland. What was it like being with Michael at Neverland?
Magical. Time stood still. It was a lot of fun. We'd watch movies, we'd play games, we'd throw popcorn at each other. At that time, I think my brothers and I felt like our role was just to let our uncle have fun.
In Neverland, Michael could be a child again, with other children.
He started to get advice during this period from his advisors who would say, you know, Michael, when you're hanging around with these kids and spending this much time with these young boys, eventually, with the kind of money and clout that you have, someone's going to sue you. And Michael's response to that was, but it's beautiful. You know, why would anybody do that?
But Michael would find out soon that the world did not see things the same way he did.
One of the most famous people in the world is in the middle of a personal and professional nightmare.
What's the biggest misconception about him?
That he's a molester.
Let's get into that when we return. Thriller made Michael the biggest star on the planet. That success allowed him to live in a world of his own making. He traveled with a huge and exotic entourage. It included Bubbles the Champ, Liz Taylor, and the child stars Macaulay Culkin, Brooke Shields, and Emmanuel Lewis. In his travels, Michael would also form close, lasting relationships with people he happened to meet, bellboys, drivers, fans, people he was introduced to at parties. His dermatologist nurse, Debbie Rowe, became a friend and confidant for decades. There were always children around, too. 13-year-old Geordie Chandler traveled with Michael, accompanied by his mother and sister. They became a new, ready-made family for him. But it would end badly. In 1993, Evan Chandler, Geordie's father, accused Michael of molesting Geordie.
Michael Jackson is the subject of a criminal investigation.
Chandler hired a lawyer and threatened to sue. He wanted a trust fund for Geordie, then a screenplay deal for himself. Michael sent a message out to the world.
I ask all of you to wait and hear the truth before you label or condemn me.
The story had broken while Michael was on a world tour for his album, Dangerous. The shows were sold out, but Michael became more and more distraught over the allegations. He began taking painkillers, then canceled the tour. With his health deteriorating, his friends and lawyers urged him to settle, and he did, for a reported $21 million. Santa Barbara DA Tom Sneddon convened 2 grand juries. They both found no evidence against Michael and refused to indict him. But the case would continue to haunt him. What's the biggest misconception about him?
I think one of the greatest is that he's a molester. That's the greatest.
Let's get into that.
I know 1,000% there is nothing negative or wrong with my uncle. The world and the media turned that into something a lot more dark.
Lisa Marie Presley urged him to settle the Chandler case. Their friendship had turned into a romance, and they wed later that year. Many believed their marriage was a sham.
Nobody thought this would last.
Lisa Marie said it was a real romance, but there was one problem. Michael wanted to start a family right away, and Lisa Marie didn't. After 2 years, they divorced. Michael was afraid that despite his successes, he would never have children. Then his longtime friend, Debbie Rowe, offered to carry his baby. Michael's first child, Prince Michael, was born in 1997. There was widespread speculation that Michael was not the biological father of Prince or his other 2 children, Paris, born in 1998, and Blanket in 2002. Whatever the truth, Michael loved his children. Do you like being a father?
I love it.
Are you very involved with him?
Yes. When he's crying, to keep him from crying, you have to do one thing.
What?
I have to stand in front of him and dance.
Really?
Yes. And he stops crying. His tears turn to laughter. And he starts happy. He smiles.
And do you do your moonwalk with him?
Yeah, I do all kind of move. You move, and then he... and he stops crying.
He stops crying?
Stops
you
crying.
must do a lot of dancing.
I do a lot of dancing, yeah.
You started your family around the same time that Michael started his family.
And I remember calling him and hearing the joy and the joy in his voice when he would talk about fatherhood. It excited me. It made me want to do it. I had my first son in '99, so we would talk. We would learn, you know, he'd tell me tricks about everything from changing diapers to discipline. It's funny because I hear his voice in my head a lot.
The relationship with TJ was an oasis of normality for Michael. Michael comforted him when TJ's mother, Dee Dee Jackson, died.
That is the most isolating and lonely experience, he made sure my brothers and I stayed on track. I've never forgotten that.
Later, TJ, his brothers, and Tito set up the D.D. Jackson Foundation to help children in need. They were inspired by Michael, who donated tens of millions of dollars to charity and traveled the world helping children affected by war and famine.
I used to remember seeing kids crying and in so much pain, and then like that, just become happy over the presence of one person.
He went to hospitals?
All the time. All the time. And he donated a lot of his income to charitable things. And for us, seeing that inspired us to do our mom's foundation.
Michael also opened up Neverland to sick children. One of those children was Gavin Arvizo. Gavin had cancer. Michael befriended him and helped the family financially, but he would soon find himself again faced with accusations of abuse, and they would create the gravest crisis in his career and life.
Please keep an open mind and let me have my day in court.
When we return. Michael Jackson often invited sick children to Neverland with their families. One of those children would be his downfall. It all began with a film we aired on 2020.
Tonight, a red-hot British documentary. 8 months with superstar Michael Jackson that will leave you speechless.
That documentary shocked the world when Michael said he slept in the same bed as some of his young guests, including 13-year-old Gavin Arvizo.
The most loving thing to do is to share your bed with someone.
That was very questionable judgment on Michael's part. You know, to admit that he sleeps in the bed with children who aren't his own, and that this is a beautiful thing. People couldn't really relate to that.
Child Protective Services became concerned, and that led to investigations by the Los Angeles and Santa Barbara police departments. The boy in the documentary, Gavin Arvizo, said Michael was innocent at first. But once the investigation started, Gavin said Michael did molest him. Gavin's mother backed him up, but there were problems in her past. She had been caught shoplifting and had sued a department store for sexual assault. The LA Police Department found no evidence against Michael. But the Santa Barbara DA, Tom Sneddon, charged Michael with child molestation and sent 70 officers to Neverland to search for evidence.
2 counts in violation of Penal Code Section 222 that involves administering an intoxicating liquor to a child for the purpose of committing a felony.
Michael Jackson was officially charged yesterday in California with 7 counts of child molestation and 2 counts of intoxicating a minor so he could molest him. Michael hired attorney Tom Mesereau to defend him. Mesereau thought the prosecution had no case at all.
Michael Jackson was a huge target. Never in the history of Santa Barbara County had this many officers and this many resources been devoted to trying to convict somebody. They did it because it was Michael Jackson and they wanted to become famous.
Michael's friend, Macaulay Culkin, also defended him when we talked. He talked about young boys sleeping in his bed, in his bedroom. Well, you and your brother Kieran had done that.
Yeah, it wasn't anything like weird. It wasn't anything we thought about. We go to the movies and we do this, we do that. And it's like, okay, you know, just you plop down, you go to sleep, you wake up. It's just kind of just what happens, you know?
Once again, Michael addressed his fans directly.
I deserve a fair trial like every other American citizen.
The prosecution was based on the testimony of the Arvizos and on material found at Neverland, none of which was child porn.
At the beginning of the trial, it was almost like Michael thought the charges were so preposterous that he wasn't going to take them seriously. Over time, it really starts to take a toll on him.
The trial lasted 4 months. On June 13th, 2005, the jury acquitted Michael on all charges. It was a victory, but one that left Michael devastated emotionally and physically. Here was the biggest star with the biggest fall that one can imagine, from being beloved to being vilified. Did it change him? Did it make him withdraw from people?
Just was overwhelming for him to become recognized in those lights, because he wanted to be everything but that.
He told the world that he was turning his back on Neverland.
I won't live there ever again. I'll visit Neverland. It's a house now. It's not a home anymore.
Michael left the country with the children. He was their only parent. Debbie had terminated their parental rights. They moved from country to country. The children wore masks in public to keep their faces out of the papers. He became increasingly dependent on painkillers for the injuries he had suffered on stage. And he spent lavishly.
Michael was very deeply in debt. He would get all these advisors who would come in and say, Michael, you got to stop spending. And he would go, you're fired.
By 2009, Michael was over $100 million in debt. Then in March 2009, after years away from the stage, Michael announced his return, the This Is It tour.
This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call.
His 10 London concerts were sold out in less than an hour. 40 more concerts were added and sold out as well. But rehearsals for the 50-year-old star were grueling, and Michael drove himself to make everything perfect.
Wait, no, my friend. No, you gotta let it simmer. It's got a moment where it has to simmer.
That's right.
What made him start again?
I think there were many reasons why he came back, but one of the reasons which he told me was that his kids never saw him perform, and he wanted to perform and for them to see what their dad can do.
Tell me about the last time you saw Michael.
We had all gotten together, the entire family, to celebrate my mom's and dad's anniversary.
Happy memories.
Amazing memories. I remember I had just had a child, and he asked me, was I finished? And I said, no, I'm not done. He said, how many more do you want? And I said, I think I want 2 more. And he said, me too. So he wanted more children. Also, I remember when I said goodbye to him, he said, you're coming to London, right? And I said, I'll be there. And he said, great, I'll see you soon. And that was the last time I spoke to my uncle.
But that tour would never happen.
We have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing. He's not breathing, and we're trying to pump him, but...
Okay, how old is he?
He's 50 years old, sir.
50?
He's not responding to anything, no, he's not responding to CPR or anything.
Michael Jackson was brought here in full cardiac arrest
and is now in a coma.
This is hard. My brother, the legendary king of pop, Michael Jackson, passed away on Thursday, June 25th, 2009 at 2:26 p.m.
I was just totally shocked. I got a call from my middle son, Terrell, and he said, Dad, is it true what they're saying on TV? I said, what are they saying? They said they just rushed Uncle Michael off to the hospital to cardiac arrest. And I said, what? Then Janet called me, and she said, Tito, are you driving? I said, yeah. She said, pull over. Right then I knew, it just...
What did you know? What did you think?
I was going to hear the worst news in the world.
What is expected to be the largest showbiz memorial in Hollywood history, the King of Pop gets a send-off worthy of American royalty.
Held in Los Angeles, it was a global event. An estimated 1 billion people around the world watched the memorial. In Michael's hometown of Gary, Indiana, in theaters like the Apollo, where he had performed, in the White House. I was at the memorial, and it was heart-wrenching.
Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. And I just wanted to say I love him so much.
The world mourned, but there were questions about Michael's death.
We know he was taking some prescription medications. The cause of death has been deferred, which means that the medical examiner has ordered additional testing.
He had been given an overdose of a prescription drug he was dependent on, which led to cardiac arrest. Some in his family didn't believe his death was an accident. I talked to his sister, LaToya, who was furious because she thought that Michael's death could have been prevented.
Michael was surrounded by people that positioned themselves in his life, positioned themselves to control and take advantage of him.
He had 8 brothers and sisters. Couldn't anybody help him? Couldn't anybody intervene? Couldn't anybody do anything?
We tried many, many times to intervene, and we were kept away.
All the people who could potentially help him, he'd replace with sycophants, with yes men. And certainly by the end of his life, you know, he'd found the ultimate yes man, who was Conrad Murray.
Murray was Michael's personal physician. He kept Michael supplied with painkillers and drugs to help him sleep. Murray had injected Michael with the powerful drug propofol so he could sleep, and then failed to monitor him. The DA charged Murray with involuntary manslaughter. The trial lasted less than a month.
We find the defendant, Conrad Robert Murray, guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Whatever justice the verdict may have brought for Michael's children, a painful transition lay ahead. What are their lives like? What do they do? When we return. Michael Jackson often talked about wanting to be a force for good. And even in death, he has been. His music continues to earn huge amounts. 20% of his estate goes to charities. Certainly, Michael left behind a musical legacy that is vast and indelible. But he also left behind a personal legacy, his children and his family. In 2012, Michael's nephew, TJ, formally joined Michael's mother, Catherine, as co-guardian of his children. Tell me what you had to teach them or what you wanted them to know.
I don't think there's anything I had to teach them because my uncle taught them everything they need to know.
Really?
All the important things. Their core ethics and values are so strong. And there's moments where I just hear my uncle's voice come out of them because their love for people and their innocence.
How do you describe him to the children?
I don't even spend time on my uncle with them as a performer. I just try to make sure that they know their father was one of the greatest fathers. And that's why it's tough for me because he never got to finish his job as a parent.
Now, give me everybody's age. Prince, give me your age and what you're going to move down each person.
9, 8, 4.
The children are now grown. Prince is 19, Paris 18, and Blanket 14. They have all felt the loss deeply, and Paris has struggled with depression. What are their lives like? What do they do?
You know, it's pretty normal, which is what I think my uncle would have wanted, and it's something I know they want. Prince is on Dean's List at his university. Paris graduated last year from high school, and BG, which is what we call him.
Good, you don't call him Blanket?
No, for the most part, we call him BG now. He's going to be a freshman in high school, and I couldn't be any more proud of how they're turning out.
The Jackson family continues to make music. Tito has recently recorded his first solo album, Tito Time. The first single off the album, Get It Baby, reached the top 20 in the charts. So now you're going to bring out your own first album?
My very own first album. I've always been the quiet member of the group. So I think it's time for me to just express myself a little bit, Barbara.
PJ also records and performs internationally with his brothers Terrell and Taj. Their band, 3T, was originally mentored by Michael.
You know, it's funny because my brothers and I were doing really well. In our debut album sold 3 million records, and we were traveling with him quite a bit. So we'd see him, you know, sell out stadiums. And even though we were selling out arenas, we felt like we were failing.
I can't imagine what it is like to have a music career, to want a career, and your uncle is Michael Jackson. I mean, how do you live up? You can't live up to that, can you?
You know what? I'm learning you can.
You can.
You cannot.
You cannot. How would you describe Michael Jackson?
A magician on a stage, the greatest entertainer, in my opinion, the world's ever seen. He was amazing. He was amazing.
For half a century, Michael Jackson's music thrilled and entertained us. Millions loved him for his talent, but that same talent isolated him. He was unique, always seeking to transcend boundaries. And if he seemed to many an enigma to the end, one thing was never in doubt. Michael was about the music, an artist boundless in his ambition and creativity. Questions may linger about this musical genius, but the magic he shared with us is unforgettable. There was never anyone like Michael Jackson. I'm fortunate to have known him and his remarkable family. For Investigation Discovery, I'm Barbara Walters. About paparazzi and things like that. A visitor.
You want me to sign?
Oui.
Autograph?
Autographe? Oui.
Oui.
Quel appelles-tu?
Charles.
Charles.
Charles?
Charles. How do you like my perfect French?
It's good.
Merci.
You're welcome.